Maya Chen pulled her dark blue Honda Civic into the hospital parking lot at 6:45 a.m., just like she did every morning. The rising sun painted streaks of orange and pink across the sky as she adjusted her white coat and grabbed her coffee thermos. Today was going to be another busy day at Metropolitan Hospital, where she worked as a resident doctor in the emergency room. At 26 years old, Maya was living her dream of becoming a doctor. Her parents had moved to America from China when she was just 2 years old, carrying nothing but two suitcases and hope for a better future. They had worked multiple jobs. Her father as a dishwasher and later a cook, her mother cleaning houses and working at a laundromat, to make sure Maya could focus on her studies. The emergency room was already bustling when Maya walked in. Dr. Thompson, her supervisor, greeted her with a tired smile. "Ready for another day?" he asked, handing her a stack of patient files. Maya nodded, quickly scanning through them. She loved the challenge of helping different patients, even though the long hours were exhausting. Throughout her 16-hour shift, Maya treated all kinds of cases. There was a young boy with a broken arm from falling off his bike, an elderly woman having chest pains, and a construction worker who had injured his hand. Each patient got Maya's full attention and care. Her colleagues often said she had a special way of making patients feel comfortable, no matter how scared or worried they were. During her lunch break, Maya called her parents like she always did. Her mother asked the usual questions. "Are you eating enough? Are you getting enough sleep? Have you met any nice young doctors?" Maya couldn't help but smile. Even though she was a grown woman with a successful career, her parents still worried about her like she was their little girl. "Everything is fine, Mom," Maya assured her. "I'm taking care of myself." She didn't mention that she had been working extra shifts lately or that she often skipped meals when the ER got too busy. Her parents had sacrificed too much for her to complain about the challenges of achieving her dream. As the day went on, Maya dealt with more difficult cases. A car accident brought in 3 patients at once, and she worked with the trauma team to stabilize them. Her hands stayed steady, her mind clear and focused, even as chaos swirled around her. This was what she had trained for, what she had worked so hard to accomplish. By 11 p.m., Maya's shift was finally ending. Her feet ached, and her eyes felt heavy, but there was satisfaction in knowing she had helped many people today. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, thinking about the hot shower waiting for her at home. Her apartment was only a 20-minute drive away, in a quiet neighborhood near the hospital. As she walked to her car, Maya checked her phone. There were several messages from her best friend Sarah, asking if she wanted to go out for dinner tomorrow. Maya typed a quick reply, promising to make time soon. She knew she had been working too much lately, missing out on time with friends, but she was determined to prove herself in her residency program. The parking lot was nearly empty now, with only a few cars belonging to the night shift staff. Maya's footsteps echoed in the quiet as she walked to her car. The night was clear and cool, with a bright moon hanging overhead. She thought about how different her life was from what her parents had imagined when they first came to America. They had hoped she would have opportunities, but they probably never dreamed their daughter would become a doctor. Starting her car, Maya checked her mirrors and turned on her favorite playlist. The familiar music helped her stay alert for the drive home. She was looking forward to getting some rest before her next shift. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she noticed a police car parked near the hospital entrance. It was a common sight in this area, and she thought nothing of it at the time. Little did Maya know that this ordinary day was about to become anything but routine. The events that would unfold in the next hour would not only change her life, but would also spark a movement that would impact the entire community. Maya was just 5 minutes away from her apartment when she saw the flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. She had been driving carefully, following all traffic rules, just like she always did. Still, she knew exactly what to do in this situation. Slowly and carefully, Maya pulled her car over to the right side of the road. She turned on her interior lights so the officers could see clearly inside her car. Then she placed both hands on the steering wheel, just like her father had taught her years ago. The police car stopped behind her, its bright lights making it hard to see anything in her mirrors. 2 officers stepped out of their patrol car. Maya watched them approach in her side mirror. Officer Barrett, a tall man with gray hair at his temples, walked toward her driver's side window, while Officer Reynolds, younger and shorter, stood a few feet behind her car. The night was quiet except for the sound of their boots on the pavement and the hum of her car's engine. License and registration, Officer Barrett demanded without greeting her or explaining why he had pulled her over. His flashlight beam shone directly into Maya's face, making her squint. She kept her movements slow and deliberate as she reached for her documents in the glove compartment. "May I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" Maya asked politely, handing over her license and registration with steady hands. She noticed Officer Barrett's eyes narrow as he looked at her name on the license. "You ran the stop sign back there," he said sharply. Maya knew this wasn't true. She had come to a complete stop, just like she always did. Something felt wrong about this situation. "Sir, I'm certain I made a complete stop," Maya said calmly. "I always do, especially after working long shifts at the hospital." She gestured slightly to her hospital ID badge still hanging from her rearview mirror. Officer Barrett's expression hardened. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Maya's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "May I ask why you need me to step out of the vehicle?" "I don't consent to any searches," she said clearly, remembering the legal rights workshop she had attended last year. "Listen here." Officer Barrett leaned closer to her window, his tone becoming hostile. "I don't know what kind of fancy doctor you think you are, but when an officer gives you an order, you follow it. Or maybe things work differently where you come from." Maya felt her cheeks burn at the obvious racism in his comment, but she remained professional. She noticed Officer Reynolds shifting uncomfortably behind the car. Carefully, Maya reached up and pressed the button on her dashboard camera, making sure it was recording. She also pulled out her phone and placed it on the dashboard, its camera facing the window. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job," Maya said firmly. "But I know my rights. Unless you have probable cause, I do not consent to leaving my vehicle or to any searches. I would like to know the specific reason for this stop, and I would like your badge numbers, please." Officer Barrett's face reddened. "You people always think you're so smart," he snapped. "I bet this card isn't even yours. Where did you really get it from? And what's in that bag?" He pointed to her medical bag on the passenger seat. "That's my medical bag with hospital equipment," Maya explained patiently. "Officer, I work at Metropolitan Hospital as a resident doctor. I'm happy to show you my hospital ID. But I want to be clear that I'm recording this interaction, and I find your comments about my ethnicity inappropriate and unprofessional." The mention of recording made both officers pause. Officer Reynolds stepped forward for the first time. "Barrett," he said quietly, "maybe we should." "Shut up," Barrett cut him off. He turned back to Maya. "Pop the trunk. Now, and don't try anything funny." Maya took a deep breath. She could feel her heart pounding, but her voice remained steady. "Officer, I am formally refusing any vehicle searches without a warrant. I would like to speak to your supervisor, and I am going to call my lawyer now. Please step back from my vehicle." The situation was escalating, but Maya knew she had to stand her ground. She had worked too hard and come too far to let anyone treat her this way. What happened next would change not just her life, but the lives of many others in her community. As Maya reached for her phone to call her lawyer, she noticed movement across the street. 3 people had stopped to watch what was happening. One of them had their phone out, clearly recording the situation. Maya felt a small sense of relief. More witnesses meant more protection. Officer Barrett noticed the onlookers too. His aggressive stance changed slightly, but his voice remained harsh. "You're interfering with a police investigation," he said, trying to sound official. "We've had reports of drug trafficking in this area." Maya kept her dashboard camera and phone recording as she dialed her lawyer's number. She put the phone on speaker so everything would be clearly documented. "I'm calling my attorney now," she announced calmly. "I'd also like to note that it's 11:30 p.m., and I'm still in my hospital scrubs with my ID badge visible. I just finished a 16-hour shift saving lives." The younger officer, Reynolds, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He stepped closer to Barrett and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, maybe we should just give her a warning. She's clearly coming from work, and there are people watching." But Barrett wasn't backing down. "Listen here, Miss Chen," he said, emphasizing her name with obvious distaste. "You doctors think you're above the law, but I've been on this force for 20 years, and I know suspicious behavior when I see it. Just then, Maya's lawyer answered the phone. Sarah Martinez speaking. A clear, professional voice came through the speaker. Sarah, this is Maya Chen. I'm currently being detained by 2 officers who are demanding to search my vehicle without probable cause. They've made several discriminatory comments about my ethnicity, and I'm recording everything. I'm on Sater Street, just off Main. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. I understand, Maya. Officers, this is Sarah Martinez. I'm recording this call, and I need your badge numbers and names immediately. My client has already refused a search, and unless you have a warrant or clear probable cause, this stop needs to end now. The atmosphere shifted. Barrett's face turned red with anger, but he took a small step back from Maya's car. Reynolds quickly provided his badge number and name, his voice shaking slightly. More cars were slowing down now. Maya recognized Dr. Thompson, her supervisor, pulling over across the street. He got out of his car and started walking toward them, his white coat visible in the streetlight. Maya, is everything okay? Dr. Thompson called out. I was just leaving the hospital and saw what was happening. Barrett's demeanor changed completely when he saw the older white doctor approaching. We're conducting a routine traffic stop, sir, he said, his tone suddenly professional. Nothing to be concerned about. Really? Dr. Thompson replied, his voice sharp. Because from what I just witnessed, you're harassing one of my best residents after she just spent 16 hours saving lives in our ER. I've worked with Dr. Chen for 2 years, and I can vouch for her character. Maya kept her camera steady as she watched the situation unfold. She could see Reynolds whispering something to Barrett again, probably trying to convince him to end this before it got worse. The small crowd of onlookers had grown to about 10 people now, most with phones out. Officers, Maya spoke clearly, making sure her recordings caught every word. I want to state again that I do not consent to any searches. I have multiple witnesses here, including my supervisor, and everything has been recorded. I would like either a clear explanation of your probable cause, or I would like to leave. Sarah's voice came through the phone again. Officers, my client has been detained for over 15 minutes now without any valid reason. This stops now, or we'll be filing a formal complaint first thing in the morning. Barrett finally stepped back from Maya's car. You're free to go, he said gruffly. But watch that stop sign next time. He turned and walked back to his patrol car, leaving Reynolds to apologize awkwardly before following his partner. As the police car drove away, Dr. Thompson and several others came to check on Maya. Her hands were shaking slightly as she stopped the recordings, but her face remained composed. She knew that while this incident was over, her fight was just beginning. Those recordings would make sure that what happened tonight wouldn't be ignored or forgotten. The morning after the incident, Maya sat in Sarah Martinez's law office, watching her lawyer review the recordings from the previous night. The office was quiet except for the sound of voices coming from Maya's phone as Sarah replayed the footage for the 3rd time. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the dark circles under Maya's eyes more visible. She hadn't slept much after the incident. This is clear evidence of racial profiling, Sarah said, finally putting down the phone. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s who had handled many civil rights cases over the years. The officers had no probable cause, made discriminatory comments, and tried to intimidate you into allowing an illegal search. Maya nodded slowly, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I know I could just file a complaint and move on, she said. But I keep thinking about other people this might have happened to, people who maybe didn't have cameras or witnesses or know their rights. Sarah opened her laptop and began typing. I've already received emails from 3 of the witnesses from last night, she explained, including Dr. Thompson. They're all willing to provide statements. And that's not all. Look at this. She turned the laptop toward Maya. On the screen was a social media post with a video of the incident, taken by one of the bystanders. It had already been shared thousands of times, with comments pouring in from other medical professionals of color sharing similar experiences. What exactly would happen if we took this further? Maya asked, leaning forward in her chair. She was supposed to be sleeping before her next shift, but this felt more important. Sarah pulled out a legal pad and started writing. We can file a formal complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. We have multiple pieces of evidence, your dashboard camera footage, your phone recording, witness videos, and several credible witnesses willing to testify. We can also push for an investigation into these officers' past conduct. Maya thought about her parents, who had taught her to keep her head down and avoid trouble, but they had also taught her to stand up for what was right. What about other cases? She asked. Could we find out if these officers have done this before? Actually, Sarah said, pulling out another file, I did some preliminary research this morning. In the past year alone, there have been 6 complaints filed against Officer Barrett for similar incidents, all involving minorities. But none of those cases had this level of documentation. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at the message and smiled. That was from a reporter at the City Times. They want to run a story about what happened. This could help bring attention to the larger issue. Maya took a deep breath. She thought about her busy schedule at the hospital, the long hours she already worked, and how pursuing this would add even more to her plate. But then she remembered the look in Officer Barrett's eyes when he made those comments about her ethnicity, and how Officer Reynolds had seemed uncomfortable but didn't stop his partner. If we do this, Maya said firmly, I want it to be about more than just my case. I want to push for real changes in how the department handles these situations. And I want to help other people learn how to protect themselves like I did. Sarah nodded approvingly. We can push for several things. Mandatory bias training for all officers, review of all traffic stop data to look for racial patterns, and new department policies for vehicle searches. Your case is strong enough to demand real changes. Maya picked up her phone and looked at the time. She had 4 hours before her next shift started. Okay, she said, straightening in her chair. Let's do it. Where do we start? Sarah pulled out a thick folder. First, we file the official complaint. Then, we gather statements from all witnesses. Dr. Thompson has already offered to provide hospital records proving you were working during the time they claimed to have reports of drug trafficking. We'll build this case piece by piece. As they began working on the complaint, Maya's phone kept buzzing with messages of support from colleagues and strangers who had seen the video. She realized that what had started as a frightening traffic stop was becoming something much bigger, a chance to create real change in her community. Sarah looked up from her papers. Are you sure you're ready for this? It won't be easy. These cases can take time, and there might be pushback. Maya thought about all the other doctors, nurses, and medical students who looked like her. She thought about her parents, who had faced their own struggles in silence. I'm ready, she said firmly. Some fights are worth taking on. 1 week after filing the complaint, Maya sat in a large conference room at police headquarters. The internal affairs investigator, Captain Rodriguez, sat across from her, reviewing the evidence on his laptop. Sarah Martinez sat beside Maya, taking detailed notes. The room was serious and quiet, with only the sound of the air conditioning humming in the background. Dr. Chen, Captain Rodriguez began, looking up from his screen. We've reviewed all the footage from that night, including the officers' body cameras. He paused, his expression grave. What you experienced was unacceptable, but there's more to this story than just your incident. He turned his laptop around to show them a spreadsheet. We've analyzed Officers Barrett and Reynolds' traffic stop data for the past 2 years. The numbers are disturbing. He pointed to the screen. At their total stops, 78% involved minority drivers in an area where minorities make up only 30% of the population. Maya felt her heart beating faster. This was exactly what they had suspected, but seeing the actual numbers made it more real. Sarah leaned forward, quickly writing down the statistics. There's more, Captain Rodriguez continued. After your video went viral, other people started coming forward. We've received 15 new complaints in the past week alone, all describing similar experiences with these officers. Many of them are also medical professionals who work at hospitals in the area. He pulled out another file. One case particularly caught our attention. 3 months ago, a young black female surgeon was stopped by these same officers. They claimed she was driving a stolen car. It was her own vehicle that she had owned for 5 years. She filed a complaint, but without video evidence, it didn't go anywhere. Maya thought about how easily her own case could have ended the same way if she hadn't been recording. Sarah spoke up, her voice firm. Captain, what steps is the department planning to take? Both officers have been placed on administrative leave while we complete our investigation, he explained. We're reviewing every complaint filed against them in the past 5 years. But we're also looking at the bigger picture: how these incidents were handled, why previous complaints were dismissed, and what needs to change in our department. Just then, there was a knock on the door. A younger officer entered with a stack of files. "Sir, we've finished reviewing Officers Barrett and Reynolds' body camera footage from the past 6 months," she reported. "You need to see this." Captain Rodriguez excused himself and stepped out of the room. Maya turned to Sarah. "Do you think anything will really change?" she asked quietly. Before Sarah could answer, Captain Rodriguez returned. His face was even more serious than before. "The body camera review revealed a pattern," he said. "Officer Barrett regularly turned off his camera during traffic stops, which is against department policy. Officer Reynolds documented his concerns about Barrett's behavior in several private messages to his supervisor, but no action was taken." He sat down heavily in his chair. "Dr. Chen, your case has opened up a much larger investigation than we initially expected. We're not just looking at these 2 officers anymore. We're looking at why the system failed to stop this behavior earlier." Maya felt a mix of emotions: anger at how long this had been going on, but hope that real change might finally happen. "What happens next?" she asked. "We'll complete our investigation within the next 2 weeks, Captain Rodriguez explained. But I can tell you now that both officers will face disciplinary action. We're also implementing immediate changes in our department." He pulled out an official document and began reading. "First, all officers must keep body cameras on during every interaction with the public. Second, we're installing new dashboard cameras in all patrol cars that can't be turned off during stops. Third, we're bringing in independent consultants to review our entire traffic stop procedures and training programs." Sarah nodded approvingly as she took notes. "And what about oversight?" she asked. "How will you ensure these changes stick?" "We're establishing a civilian review board," Captain Rodriguez replied. "We want community members, including medical professionals like Dr. Chen, to help oversee these changes. This incident has made it clear that we need outside perspectives." As the meeting ended, Maya felt exhausted but satisfied. The investigation was revealing exactly what they had suspected. This wasn't just about one bad traffic stop, it was about a system that needed to change. And now, finally, that change was beginning to happen. The Metropolitan Hospital auditorium was packed. It had been 3 weeks since Maya's incident, and the hospital administration had organized a town hall meeting to address the growing concerns about racial profiling in the medical district. Doctors, nurses, medical students, and other healthcare workers filled every seat. Many were still wearing their scrubs or white coats, having come straight from their shifts. Dr. James Wilson, the hospital's chief of medicine, stood at the podium. Behind him sat Maya, Sarah, Captain Rodriguez, and several community leaders. The room buzzed with conversation until Dr. Wilson tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "What happened to Dr. Chen has opened our eyes to a serious problem affecting our medical community. In the past 3 weeks, 47 of our staff members have come forward with similar stories of being profiled near the hospital." A young resident raised her hand. "Last month, I was stopped 3 times in 1 week," she shared, her voice shaking slightly. "Each time, they said I looked suspicious in my scrubs. I was afraid to report it because I thought nobody would believe me." More hands went up around the room. One by one, doctors and nurses began sharing their experiences. A black pediatrician described being handcuffed in front of his patients' families. An Indian medical student talked about officers questioning whether her hospital ID was real. A Hispanic nurse practitioner recalled being asked if she had stolen her car. Maya watched as people who had kept these stories to themselves for years finally spoke up. Dr. Thompson, who had witnessed her traffic stop, stood up to speak next. "I've worked at this hospital for 20 years, he said firmly. "I've never been stopped once, but I've watched my colleagues of color face this harassment repeatedly. We can't ignore this anymore. These are the people who save lives in our community. They deserve better." The room erupted in applause. Dr. Wilson returned to the podium and unveiled a new initiative. "Starting today, Metropolitan Hospital is taking action," he announced. "We're creating a support system for any staff member who experiences profiling. This includes legal assistance, counseling services, and a buddy system for night shift workers." Sarah Martinez stepped up to explain the legal support program. We're establishing a hotline that medical professionals can call 24/7 if they're stopped by police, she said. We'll have lawyers ready to respond and document everything. We're also creating a database to track these incidents and identify patterns. Captain Rodriguez spoke next, addressing the room with honest concern. The police department is listening, he assured them. We're implementing new training programs, but we also want your input. We're forming an advisory committee, and we need medical professionals to join it. As the meeting continued, Maya noticed something powerful happening in the room. People who had felt alone in their experiences were now connecting with each other. Small groups formed during the breaks, exchanging phone numbers and sharing stories. Senior doctors offered support to younger residents. Nurses organized carpools for night shifts. A young medical student approached Maya during one of the breaks. Your video gave me courage, she said quietly. Last week, when I got pulled over, I remembered how you handled it. I recorded everything and knew my rights. They let me go when I mentioned having a camera. The hospital's head of security presented new safety measures. They were installing better lighting in all parking areas, adding security cameras, and creating a system where staff could request security escorts to their cars. Your safety is our priority, he emphasized. No one should feel afraid coming to or leaving work. Near the end of the meeting, Dr. Wilson made one final announcement. The hospital board has unanimously voted to create a new position, Director of Staff Safety and Community Relations, and we're asking Dr. Chen to take this role alongside her medical duties. Maya hadn't expected this. She stood up, looking at the faces of her colleagues, people who had suffered in silence for too long. I accept, she said firmly. But this isn't just about one person or one incident. This is about changing the system, and we can only do that if we work together. The meeting ended with people signing up for various committees and programs. As Maya watched her colleagues supporting each other, sharing resources, and planning actions, she realized that her difficult experience had sparked something important. A community coming together to demand change. 2 months after the town hall meeting, Maya sat in the front row of the police commission hearing room. The large chamber was filled with reporters, community members, and fellow medical professionals. Today was the day Officer Barrett and Officer Reynolds would face the consequences of their actions. Police Chief Anderson stood at the podium, his face stern as he addressed the packed room. After a thorough investigation by Internal Affairs, he began, "We have uncovered a disturbing pattern of misconduct by these officers. The evidence is overwhelming, and the department's decision is final." He turned to face Officers Barrett and Reynolds, who sat stiffly in their chairs. Barrett's face was red with anger, while Reynolds looked down at his hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Officer James Barrett," the chief announced, "you are hereby suspended without pay for 6 months. During this time, you will be required to complete extensive bias training, undergo psychological evaluation, and perform 200 hours of community service at local hospitals." The room remained silent as he continued. "Following your suspension, you will be permanently reassigned to desk duty. You will never again work as a patrol officer in this department." Barrett's fists clenched, but he said nothing. The chief then turned to Reynolds. "Officer Michael Reynolds," he said, his tone slightly different. "While you did not actively participate in the discrimination, you failed to intervene when you witnessed misconduct. You will be suspended without pay for 30 days and required to complete bias training." Reynolds nodded, accepting his punishment. The chief wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "your private messages showing concern about Officer Barrett's behavior and your cooperation with the investigation have been noted. Upon completion of your suspension, you will be paired with our new Community Relations Unit, where you will help train other officers on how to recognize and report misconduct." Sarah Martinez leaned over to whisper to Maya, "This is more than we expected. They're making a real example of this case." The chief then unveiled the department's new accountability measures. Every patrol car would now have cameras that couldn't be turned off during stops. Officers would be required to state the reason for every stop before leaving their vehicles, ensuring it was recorded. Monthly reviews would check for any patterns of racial profiling. Furthermore, the chief announced, "We're establishing a new Civilian Oversight Committee. This committee will include community members, civil rights attorneys, and medical professionals. Dr. Maya Chen has agreed to serve as one of its founding members. Maya felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She thought about how this one incident had sparked such significant changes. Then something unexpected happened. Officer Reynolds stood up and asked permission to speak. The chief nodded. "I want to apologize," Reynolds said, his voice shaking slightly. "Not just to Dr. Chen, but to everyone who's been profiled by law enforcement. I was wrong to stay silent when I saw misconduct. I failed to live up to my oath to protect and serve all members of our community." He turned to face Maya directly. "Dr. Chen, you showed more courage in standing up to injustice than I did in my entire career. I promise to spend the rest of my time on the force working to prevent what happened to you from happening to others." Barrett remained silent, his face now purple with rage. As officers led him out of the room, he refused to look at anyone. After the hearing, reporters gathered around Maya and Sarah. "Dr. Chen, do you think justice was served today?" one reporter asked. Maya thought carefully before answering. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about changing a system that allowed discrimination to go unchecked for years. These new policies and oversight measures are more important than any individual officer's discipline." As people began leaving the hearing room, Dr. Thompson approached Maya. "The hospital board meeting is next week," he reminded her. "We'll be voting on implementing similar oversight measures for our security team. One change leads to another." Maya nodded, gathering her things. The hearing was over, but the work was just beginning. She had night shift at the hospital in a few hours, and tomorrow she would start reviewing applications for the new Civilian Oversight Committee. As she walked to her car, she noticed a young police cadet watching her. The cadet smiled and said, "Your case is now part of our training at the academy. They're teaching us how to do things the right way." Maya smiled back, realizing that sometimes the biggest changes start with one person refusing to stay silent. 1 year had passed since that fateful night when Maya was pulled over. She stood at the podium in the Metropolitan Hospital Conference Center, looking out at the crowd gathered for the first annual Healthcare Workers' Justice Conference. Medical professionals from all over the country had come to learn about the changes their city had implemented. "A year ago," Maya began, her voice clear and confident, "I was just a resident trying to get home after a long shift. Today, I'm proud to report that not a single case of racial profiling has been reported in our medical district in the past 6 months." The audience broke into applause. Maya could see familiar faces in the crowd: Dr. Thompson, Sarah Martinez, Captain Rodriguez, and even Officer Reynolds, who now led the police department's community relations training program. "But this isn't just about numbers," Maya continued. "It's about the stories of change I hear every day." She gestured to a young nurse in the front row. "Last week, one of our nurses was stopped for a broken taillight. The officer approached her car, stated the reason for the stop into his camera, and treated her with complete respect. That's what professional policing looks like." Maya clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing statistics from the past year. The hospital's new safety measures had made a significant difference. The buddy system for night shift workers had expanded to 3 other hospitals in the city. The legal support hotline had helped over 200 medical professionals document and report incidents of misconduct. The Civilian Oversight Committee has reviewed over 500 traffic stops in the past year, Maya explained. "We've seen a complete transformation in how our police department interacts with our community, but the most important change has been in people's willingness to speak up." She paused, looking at some of the younger medical students in the audience. "We created a mentorship program matching experienced doctors with medical students of color. They learn not just about medicine, but about their rights and how to handle difficult situations with confidence." The next speaker was Officer Reynolds, who now worked closely with Maya on training programs. He shared how the department had completely revamped its training procedures. "Every new officer learns about what happened here," he said. "They learn that being a good police officer means standing up against discrimination, not staying silent when you see something wrong." During the lunch break, Maya walked around the conference center, listening to people share their experiences. A group of doctors from another state were planning to implement similar programs in their hospitals. Security officers from various medical facilities were discussing better ways to protect staff members. Sarah Martinez joined her, carrying a thick folder. "Remember when we thought this would just be one complaint?" she asked with a smile. Now we're helping hospitals across the country create their own support systems. Maya's phone buzzed. It was a message from her parents. They were sitting in the back of the conference room, beaming with pride. Her father had recently told her that while he had taught her to keep her head down, she had taught him the importance of standing up. As the conference continued, Maya shared more successful changes. The hospital's security cameras have been upgraded. Well-lit walking paths connected all medical buildings. A new app allowed staff to track each other's safe arrival home after late shifts. But most importantly, people felt heard and supported. The real victory, Maya said in her closing speech, isn't just in the new policies or programs. It's in the cultural shift we've created. Every medical professional who walks through our hospital doors knows that they have a whole community behind them. She looked at her watch. She had a shift starting in an hour. Some things hadn't changed. She was still a resident, still working long hours, still dedicated to saving lives. But now she was also part of something bigger. As people began leaving the conference, a young medical student approached Maya. "I start my residency next month," she said. "I was scared about working night shifts, but seeing everything you built here, it makes me feel safe." Maya smiled, remembering how she had felt a year ago. "That's exactly why we did all this," she replied. "So the next generation of medical professionals can focus on what really matters, taking care of their patients." Walking to her car, Maya passed the spot where she had been pulled over that night. The street looked different now, better lit, with security cameras visible and emergency call boxes installed. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It was in the confidence of every healthcare worker driving home, knowing they were protected, respected, and part of a community that would stand up for them.